Okay, welcome back to the Are You Strong show. I have an awesome guest on right now. And before I give away his name, once I say it, many of you will recognize it. But if we go back to his playing days in college, a QB at Florida State, and what I just learned doing some research on him, I didn't know his father also played at Florida State. That's pretty cool. And we're going to talk about that and how that relationship is going. He was the 12th pick in the NFL draft in 2011 by the Vikings. Had a nice run in the league as a quarterback. Played on a couple of different teams. If I got it right, the Vikings, the Broncos, I think the 49ers and the Raiders, right?
Correct. Yep.
And
Yep. You got it.
had a nice career. But what's really cool is what he's doing right now. He put together a uh, a I don't want to call it a networking group, but a company, a group of athletes. It's in under what's called the Post in New York City is the home, but it's really a nationwide group, uh, connected across the country. Private membership networking group is really what I look at it as. Connects leadership, and sports. Okay. And this guy, he's doing some really cool stuff. If you look at the post, you follow what he's doing, you can see the connections he's making. He's become a leader amongst leaders. Welcome to the show, Christian Ponder.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that intro. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on, and I have a ton of questions to ask you. And before I get into ripping you with a bunch of questions, why don't you just tell the audience just a little bit about yourself for those who might not know who you are?
Yeah. So I Texan, grew up outside of Dallas. My father, as you alluded to, played football. He grew up in a rural town in Georgia. He was the first to go to college because of football, and so we're always very passionate about sports in general, but obviously football. Have two brothers. I'm the middle. And sports has always been a huge part of my life. And fortunately, I had the opportunity to play at the D1 college level at Florida State, and obviously then had a childhood dream come true of playing in the NFL. And as much I think as athletes, we always have this perfectionism to us. And yes, I have a lot to be proud of in my NFL career, but I think about the things that I could have done better. And so it was great. I mean, spent 6 years in the league. It was awesome, and now doing some fun stuff in the business world. But I have three kids, two girls and a son, who we reside in Manhattan, which is very different than how I grew up. But we're navigating that with my wife and a dog. And yes, it's good stuff. I mean, it's a new chapter in my life, and it's been fun trying to continue to navigate it. And it's a constant learning process for sure.
Cool. Now, what was it like going to the same school your dad played at? Was that the inspiration for you growing up?
Yeah, it was the school that I was most familiar with for sure. I mean, we both my parents went to Florida State. They met there. My dad obviously played football there, played for Coach Bowden, who I had to was fortunate enough to play with as well. And we were on campus all the time, and we would, we were very much kind of a middle class family growing up, and we would basically take the same vacation every time we went on vacation. And we drive from Dallas. We'd stop in Tallahassee in Cairo, Georgia, which is where my dad grew up, which is about an hour north of Tallahassee, and see family there. We'd always go on campus, go to the bookstore. When it was
Yeah.
fall, we'd go to a football game, and then we go down to South Florida, which is where my maternal grandparents were. And but yeah, we were there once, twice a year, and it was what we always watched on television. I knew, when I got older in my teenage years and I was sleeping till noon, I always knew when Florida State was on because my dad was yelling at the television. So we were no fan. And it was interesting, my recruiting process. I mean, I came out in an era where we had 26 quarterbacks in the state of Texas, and my high school class signed Division I scholarships. Matt Stafford was a part of that group, and Andy Dalton, um, and Tim Tebow, who was in Florida, but was part of my class. And Stafford committed to Georgia pretty early, and then a lot of these universities kind of waiting for Tim Tebow to make his decision. And I had a bunch of offers, but Florida State was not the offer I had yet, and they wanted me to come to camp, and had a great camp. But they were kind of waiting for Tim to decide. He went to Florida, and they offered me right out of that after that, and kind of it's kind of a no brainer for me on that's where I wanted to play.
Yeah. Oh, you had one hell of a QB class.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was a lot. I mean, and I think Texas, it's very different now. And I mean, college sports, youth sports is obviously extremely different. But Texas was kind of ahead of its time where we were playing football year round. I mean,
Yeah.
we obviously play in the fall. We always had spring practice in the spring, but in the winter we had 7-on-7 leagues. I was playing in we had 7-on-7 games, once or twice a week as a quarterback. I was calling my own plays in those. In the summer, Texas was known for these big 7-on-7 tournaments. They had a state tournament at Texas A&M in July that kind of capped off that season. And so, we ran quarterback school, and so we were playing football year round, and I think we were just so much more advanced than a lot of these other states when it came to football. And now I think a lot of these groups have obviously caught up. But yeah, it was a fun time to be in that class, and
Yeah.
especially to play football in the state of Texas was great.
And you ended up playing all those guys when you were in college. Played against them all pretty much, right?
Yeah, I mean, we played. I'm trying to think because Andy was at TCU. I mean, played obviously against Tim every year. Never beat Tebow. He left. We finally beat Tebow. We broke like a 7-year streak against losing against Florida my senior year, which is a big deal. But yeah, I played those guys in the NFL. I mean, Andy obviously was in Cincinnati for a while before bouncing around, and obviously Matt was in Detroit, which was our division in Minnesota. So we played
Yeah.
each other twice a year, and yeah, it was definitely a fun group to be a part of.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, like, from a guy who watches the game on TV, never on the field like you were, right? And you watch you guys go up after the game, you have your little chit chats after the games are over. What are those conversations like? What's going on there?
Uh, it depends probably on your familiarity. I mean, I think it's a fraternity, especially the quarterback
Yeah.
level. So I think everyone is pretty friendly with everybody else. And so it's usually just small talk. How's the family? Hey, good game. Did you come out okay? We'll see you next one. Or there's always the banter of complaining about, oh, the ref screwed us this time. Like, but it's again, everyone knows each other pretty well. It's a fun group.
Yeah. Now, do you still communicate with those guys? Still stay in touch?
Yeah, there's a group that I keep in touch with, and then guys that I didn't know before that I've come to know after I've retired. That it's definitely a fraternity. But yeah, some of my closest friends are quarterbacks or football players or athletes in general.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
So what was it like? You played for Coach Bowden, and your dad played for Coach Bowden.
Yeah.
How did that come to, like? How was that? Meaning, did Coach Bowden ever talk to you about your dad and like, hey, this is your dad was this and this is what you should be and that kind of stuff? Or was it, hey, you're more than this than what your dad was? Does they ever have that kind of chat?
No, no, there really wasn't. I mean, and especially when I was there, Coach Bowden was definitely kind of I mean, he's still obviously very active in his role, but probably less so than what he was when my
Yeah,
dad was playing. I mean, he was my dad played in the early '80s, and this was
yeah,
2006 through 2010, and 20 years later, and um, but he always remembered my dad. He always remembered my dad's mom. He always remembered my grandmother's name and was asking about her. And
that's
for
awesome.
those who aren't familiar with Coach Bowden, he was a tremendous human being and cared more about players' well-being off the field than
Yeah,
them being the best football players, and that translated to them being great football players. And
yeah,
obviously won 2 national championships at Florida State and had some tremendous teams. But he's a father figure for so many people that came through
yeah.
that program, including
He's a
my
legend.
dad. And yeah, he
Yeah.
was amazing. And going back to asking about why Florida State, I remember we took a trip. I think I was playing. It was in middle school. I was playing middle school. I was the backup quarterback, but my dad had a reunion for one of his teams, and Coach Bowden came to the dinner like the Friday night before the Saturday game, and my dad introduced me. It was the first time I kind of shook Coach Bowden's hand, and he asked me if I was playing football. I said yes. He asked me what position. I said quarterback, and he grabbed my right arm. He said, maybe we can use this arm one day. And I was kind of like set on, yeah, that would be a dream. And so it was very grateful that that actually came to
That
fruition.
must have been so cool. It's
It
must.
was. It
Yeah.
was.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, I asked this question to all the athletes that joined the show. When did you know Was it eighth grade? Like when Bowden grabbed your arm? When did you know that, hey, I can play at not just like the next level, but the highest level possible?
It was so I always felt like I was a good athlete in any of the sports except basketball. I sucked at basketball mainly because like my dad, we didn't watch basketball, so like
Yep.
I was never that inspired to be a basketball player. But like outside of that, I always felt like I was a well-rounded. It was if it was baseball, if it was football, if it was I played lacrosse a little bit, soccer. Like I always felt like I was one of the best on the field.
Yeah.
But like my football journey started slow. I mean, I played more defense in middle school. I was the backup quarterback. The one time I started because the starter was hurt, I was terrible. They benched me. Was kind of a late bloomer when it came to being quarterback, and then didn't start on varsity until my junior year of high school. And we were more of a wing tee, like ran
Yeah.
first. And I'm pretty sure I threw more interceptions than I did touchdowns my junior year. But and we didn't have the technology that we have now. There was no huddle platform. There weren't all these platforms and my for recruiting. And so my dad um burned a DVD. He got all the film from my coach that was on a VHS. He
Yeah.
uploaded it on the computer, burned it on a DVD, made his own my own highlight tape, sent it out to 115 D1 colleges. And I was unsure. I was unsure what was going to happen. I think Rivals was the big platform
Yeah.
back then. I don't know how relevant it is now, but I wasn't rated as a star. I had no stars my junior year. But fortunately, whatever was on film was good enough that I got my first offer for University of North Carolina that came in kind of February after my junior year, kind of that winter. I remember in the weight room, coach handed me a letter. I opened it from UNC, and it was Coach John Bunting, who was the head coach at the time, offering me a scholarship. And I think that was obviously an extreme validation for me that like, holy crap, okay, I feel like I was a good athlete
Yeah.
because of my film and my stats. They weren't that great. I'm not rated on Rivals. I don't know. I didn't have external validation that I could play at that level. My dad was obviously very encouraging, but I think getting that external validation was okay. I can play at that level. And it was funny once that was validated. I went my senior year, and I had an unbelievable year my senior year in high school and played with a lot of confidence. And then, but then then you take the step up to college, and kind of same thing happened. I had some hard times my redshirt year. Wasn't I was like fifth on the depth chart. Um, Slowly climbed my way up, and then my redshirt sophomore year, or sorry, my redshirt freshman year, I was third on the depth chart. Second string quarterback got suspended for a couple games. I'm the second string guy. We play at Virginia Tech on a Thursday night game. Our starting quarterback gets knocked out with a concussion. I step in and play, and played well. Played well for 70, 80, man, 90% of the game. And then the last three, when we were at Virginia Tech's ranked. We're not ranked. We're going, in the fourth quarter, we're up. I throw a touchdown. And then last three drives, I think it ended fumble, interception, and we lost.
Hmm.
But well, I think the validation of, okay, I can play at this level,
Yeah.
and I think what gave me the most confidence was when I would go back and watch film of myself. And I think this is what athletes are great at. The best athletes are great at. Everything I watched on film that I didn't do well, I knew was correctable.
Mm.
And I think that gave me a lot of confidence that like, okay, I make these good plays, I make these bad plays. These bad plays aren't because of my own limitations. It's because of these mental mistakes or bad mechanics, but I can work on my mechanics. I can correct these mental mistakes. And so I think watching that on film and realizing that I have the tools in the tool belt to be great. Now let's just put in the work. Let's
Yeah.
polish. Let's put in the work to get better. I think that gave me a tremendous amount of confidence.
That's awesome. And most athletes, when they're making mistakes, it goes the other way. You know,
Mm.
they let those My com
Yeah. What happened? Did you
my com
crash?
my computer just blacked out there for a second. That's not good. Right in the
Yeah.
middle of
No.
what's going on. But what I
Yeah, no
was
worries.
saying was that um most athletes, when something goes wrong, it's hard for them to correct it. Would you agree that the elite ones can do it? The ones that a lot of athletes
Yeah.
they carry it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, especially I think in the moment in the game, right? Some people have a hard time getting over that mistake, or and I think the elite ones, right, quickly get over that, or they could play terrible for 3 quarters, but when it's the most critical times of the game, they show up, and
Yeah.
I don't know if that can be taught, if that's innate. I'm not sure. Um, maybe it's external and having a good coach early on that teaches
Yeah.
you. But like, yeah, I think for me now, there are obviously moments in games where like I made mistakes and I was crushed. I think especially early, the younger I was, and I also think in the NFL. I mean, I kind of we were talking before this when we started recording this, but I had an injury my junior year in college. I was going to turn pro if I did wasn't injured, got injured, ended up coming back my senior year. That injury was in my right shoulder, which was my throwing shoulder. And when I came back from that injury, I didn't feel like I threw the football the same than before I was injured. And there was a knock on my confidence. And I think especially at the quarterback position, but really anything in sports, anything in life. I mean, if you're not
Yeah.
playing with a certain level of confidence or performing with a certain level of confidence, and especially as the pressure ramps up when you go from college to the NFL, especially as a first round pick, you know, at that level, the pressure is tremendous. And when you're not playing with confidence, it just compounds on itself. And
Yeah.
so when I would make a mistake, yeah, it was harder to get over that moment at that level for sure.
So let's go to Florida State and let's go to the NFL. Give me your most memorable moment in each place.
So the two that stand out to me at Florida State, my junior year again was by far my best season, and we have a primetime game Thursday night at University of North Carolina. UNC had the number one or two ranked defenses in all of college football, and we were okay. I think we were kind of right around 500, maybe a little better than 500. So not a great season for Florida State, but they were by far, picked to beat us, and we are down 2 touchdowns at halftime and end up coming back and winning that game. Had a 99 tied like for the, I had a 99-yard touchdown pass um, and just came back. And it was a tremendous amount of fun and played with a tremendous amount of confidence. And that really stood out. And then I think my last game at home in Doak Campbell Stadium my senior year. Again, we broke the losing streak to the University of Florida. We beat them. It was Urban Meyer's last game as a head coach for University of Florida, and won 31-7 and had a great game. And then we found out we made the ACC championship game after that game. But that really stood out. And then at the NFL level, I think always the first game that I played in was a primetime game. We were at Chicago getting spanked my rookie year. They threw me in the fourth quarter for just to get in and play, and played well in the fourth quarter. So they made me the starter the next week. We played Green Bay. This is 2011. Green Bay had just won the Super Bowl, and it was my first start at home. And I had a great game. We lost, but like I was like, okay, I could do this,
Yeah.
and had the confidence to perform. And but I think my best game and most memorable moment, my second year, we beat Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers in his prime beat Green Bay at home in a shootout to make the playoffs. And that was the year that Adrian Peterson won MVP, but threw 3 touchdowns, and that was a memorable game for sure, and probably the best game I played at that level.
Isn't it amazing how you could remember game by game, play by play? It's like you got the whole film running in your head, right?
Yeah, I mean I mean the good plays and definitely the bad plays, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
that's cool.
Yeah,
So let me ask you this. Let's go back to again. I'm gonna flip back and forth to different times of your life.
yeah, yeah.
What advice can you give to the high school kids now where the world of recruiting in college is completely different.
Yeah.
Is there any advice you can give them to help prepare them for those that might be listening about, hey, this is what you got to be ready for when you step on the field, your freshman year, preseason camp?
Oh, yeah, it's a good question. Obviously, it's so different now.
Yeah.
And I think the best advice that I always got, and Coach Fisher was big to preach on this, but I think as anybody, is just control what you can control, and what that means is you can control your work ethic, your preparation, your attitude, your coachability. Um, but you gotta put in the work, and when things aren't going well, you got to work that much harder and put in the time, figure out. I always talk about this, and it's the same in business, but obviously in sports is you've got to be honest with yourself. What are the things I got to get better at? So that's watching film of yourself. That's asking your coach what I need to get better at. Identify those things, and it's targeted effort, right? Like, oh, my footwork sucks on my 7-step drop. Go out there and do it 1,000 times until you get it right,
Yeah.
or I don't understand this complex defense. Then go watch film and get in the film room and prepare yourself. And I think especially now in an era where there's so much distraction around us, right? Think about, I mean,
Yeah.
if every person pulled up their iPhone and looked at your screen time amount, and you're on your phone an average 7 hours a day, what if you're spending 7 hours, 2 hours in the film room, 3 hours in the weight room, around the field? Like,
Yeah.
think about how much further along you would be. I think every athlete, if you ask Michael Jordan, if you ask Kobe Bryant, if he was still alive, you ask Tom Brady, none of them I think will ever say that they were the most talented person on the court of the field. I think they would say they worked harder than everybody else.
The hardest worker.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. So the next stage then, okay, we're talking about preparing kids for coming into college. How about, I mean, you were one of the few who made it to the next level. What advice can you give to the college athlete about, hey, the game's over. There's no NFL, there's no CFL, there's no UFL, there's nothing.
Yeah.
Preparing them for life. And then the next question is, sec part two is, okay, now I'm an NFL guy like yourself. It's over. How can they prepare for what's next after the NFL?
Yeah, so I think in those transition moments, whether you're in college and NFL, I think finding someone that you can learn from, who's a little ahead of you, is always helpful. I think for the college athlete who's transitioning out, first don't hide that side of yourself. I've been asked, hey, if on my resume, do I put I was an athlete? Do I not put that? Put it,
Yeah,
because first of all, and we've built the whole community around this. There's a lot of data that's come out that shows the outperformance of college athletes
yeah,
when it comes to performance in business and leadership. And so, because what do athletes possess? Athletes possess soft skills, intangibles, work ethic, grittiness, competitiveness, drive, accountability, discipline.
yeah,
List goes on. And soft skills take experiences over time to develop. And a lot of those experiences have to do with doing the hard thing, overcoming adversity. And especially now when we're in a society built around avoiding hard things, avoiding adversity, we fast food was amazing because, you go to the drive through and they hand it to you in 5 minutes.
right.
We're too lazy for that. That is too much of an. We have to have McDonald's delivered to us by a
Yeah,
delivery driver. We get mad if our Amazon Prime package is delivered in 3 days instead of 2 days. And
yeah,
so, um, have confidence in that side of yourself. So put it on your resume. If someone doesn't hire you because you are an athlete, you shouldn't work there anyways. That person, you're not going to find joy and a valuable experience in that workplace. Find someone that values that, but take confidence in who you are. Our whole mission, kind of a high level mission of the Post, is like, we want athletes to be athletes for the rest of their life. So
yeah,
the approach that you took to sports, the work ethic, the self-reflection, the honesty about my performance, identifying those things I can get better at, overcoming adversity, working well on teams, communicating, all of that makes you successful in business. It makes you, when you're a parent, successful as a parent, as a spouse.
Yeah.
And so the things that to continue to lean in, but find people that are there to pull you along. And I think, for people who transition to college or college NFL or NFL or college outside of the NFL, like finding a mentor who's ahead of you is a great, and someone who
Yeah.
understands what you're going through is very helpful. Um, for the NFL guy, the professional athlete who's transitioning out too, I think there's some level of insecurity that we're behind. I think society, whether it was in college or professional, but probably more so in the professional world, professional sports world, that lost time as a professional athlete, not in the real world, is some sort of liability. And it's somewhat true that you're a little bit behind. But again, hard skills are a lot easier to
Yeah.
learn and hard than soft skills. So for if you're in the NFL, it's better to prepare that transition, start figuring out what you're passionate about, what you're interested in, start building your network, your professional network before you ever make that transition out. Have an
Yeah.
idea of the things that you might want to pursue when sport is over, but before you transition. And people like Kelvin Beachum, Larry Fitzgerald, who's now retired, but Larry did it really well while he was playing. But it's better to put in the work. And I think for a while, I think putting in work outside of football, outside of sports, maybe seemed like a distraction. You shouldn't be
Yeah.
doing that.
Stay
But that
focused, right?
yes, but I think you have plenty of time in the off season to start looking at these things. So I think building that type of network before you make that transition
Yeah.
out, and do some self-reflection on, what do I care about? What am I interested? So it's not a shock to your system when you're done playing.
So what lessons did you learn from the NFL that helped you with your transition now and into and the post? Like the post is so cool. We're gonna dive deep into that. But what's the biggest takeaway you took from the NFL that helped you get ready?
Yeah, I don't know if I handled my transition well. I think I actually didn't do a good job of building a good enough network or good enough idea of what I wanted to pursue. I think I had a general idea. I studied finance as my undergrad. I got my undergrad in 2.5 years at Florida State, immediately went into an MBA, finished my MBA while I still had 2 semesters left at Florida State while still playing, and started a master's in sports administration or sports management. And um, I think I was always interested in the financial world, but I didn't really carve out kind of my niche, or what I was most interested in when I was done playing. And part of my motivation to move to New York when I was done was to help figure that out. But I still didn't exactly know, and I didn't enter those conversations to figure out with a whole lot of confidence, or knowledge in going to those conversations. And I think that hurt me a little bit. But I think, as I mentioned before, I think the grittiness, the work ethic that you develop in sports, you figure it out. And it's through my experiences of trying different things. I mean, I thought I was going to wealth management, had conversations in financial services, and that ended up not pursuing that, and called college football games for ESPN for a season. Dabbled a little bit. I got recruited by a small hedge fund here based in New York to be on the business development side, and did some work with them, and got into angel investing and fell in love with entrepreneurship, and started actually building out an app that was kind of an interactive, gamified way to study playbooks and learn playbooks. And then, really kind of fell in love with this idea for the post. Um, but I think I wish I would have taken my own advice that I'm saying now, of like spending more time while I was playing to really create my passion and interests before I left, because I didn't really do that.
Yeah, I think everybody thinks, again, I never played in the NFL, but I think a lot of the guys might think, well, it'll take care of itself,
Yeah,
right?
it won't.
No,
Yeah,
no. I
it
mean, no
won't.
one takes care of you but you, right?
Yeah, and I think we are, as athletes, we're spoiled, and especially in football, at the Division 1 level, at the professional level, we have so much structure. Our hand is held in a lot of situations,
Yeah.
right? We don't develop the muscles of creating our own levels of accountability for ourselves, our own reliance, and like, I mean, I always say this, kind of the 4 areas that I struggle with, I think most athletes struggle with in the transition, are purpose, identity, structure, and routine, and community. Because when it comes to purpose, especially in football, especially going to the state of Texas, hey, your purpose is being an athlete, and I go to school to stay eligible, make good grades so that I can play on the field. I take care of my body, I eat well, I train, I do all these things so I can be a good performer on the field. And so if your purpose is football, well, you're screwed because football is going to end. Therefore, your
Yep.
purpose is going to end, or at least so you've got to figure out. And even from a long term motivation, it's actually smarter to figure out. Okay, I play football for a greater purpose, so that that purpose still exists when I'm done. But also when there's adverse times where things are hard when it comes to your sport, it's you're still have this motivation of okay, this is but I'm playing because there's something greater than me that I'm working towards, or um so purpose, identity, right? So we are athletes. It's so deeply ingrained in our identity. And suddenly, obviously, potentially being an athlete is over. Being a football player is over. But our whole thing is again, hey, no, you're not done being an athlete. Part of being an athlete is yeah, like okay, you were in your sport, but athlete, we call it the athlete operating system. It is a mindset as well, and that mindset shouldn't ever leave you. You should take confidence in being an athlete, and so don't we actually encourage everyone to maintain that identity because it is a
Yeah.
competitive advantage. Structure and routine. Again, hey, here's the classes you're going to take. We're going to have a class checker to make sure that you're there. Here's your schedule. Here's when you're going to eat, where you're going to eat, what you're going to
Yeah.
eat. Hey, here's when you're going to practice.
Yep.
Here's when you're going to meet in the film room. You're told by the system to be where you're going to be, all these things, right? Our whole structure and routines are built around someone telling us what to do and how to do it and where to do it at all times. And then suddenly it's gone,
Gone.
and so you've got to have your own initiative and your own routines and structures, and that's hard because you haven't developed those muscles. Um and so when you get in the off season, if you can develop that own structure and routine and start developing those muscles, that's really helpful.
Do
And
you
then the
find a
community.
lot of, but do you find a lot of guys who are so used to somebody telling, I think like many of the guys who like it, they carry it into their life and continue. And some guys are so used to somebody else doing it for them when it's over, they don't know what to do.
I know, yeah, and that's why it's like you've first of all you got to identify that that is the case. I think people don't really ever figure that out. They don't
Yeah.
self-reflect enough to realize that that's why they're struggling. Um, I think awareness is obviously helpful. So to be aware that like, hey, I'm struggling because I haven't developed these muscles. I haven't developed this muscle set to create my own, routines and
Yeah.
structures around my own life. So I mean, Google say, hey, what's a good calendar for my life? And like,
Yeah.
it's not hard. So creating accountability. I think the other part about being in sports is you have this built-in accountability system. You have teammates,
Yeah.
you have coaches that are there to hold you accountable. If you're not doing the things you're supposed to do, you're off the team, you're punished. That's not the case when you're by yourself anymore. Now, obviously, if you have a family, there's some accountability there, but find accountability partners, right? And that's a part of community. That's the fourth pillar that I talk about. Like the loss of community, you're a part of a team, you're part of a locker room, you're part of this deeply rooted, connected community when you're in sports. And then a lot of us, the keys to the locker room are closed once you're done playing and you don't have that community anymore. And that's a big part of why we want to create the posts. But yeah, accountability is also a big part of being in a community. And so how do you create that accountability and be a part of the community when you're done playing?
And I think some guys, I coined a phrase, maybe I told you the first time we met, that I think athletes die twice.
Yeah.
Is when they're done playing the first time, their identity's stripped and
Yeah.
they literally die while they're living, but they got to live with it.
Yeah.
And some guys handle it better than others, you know, and then you die in real life.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think and again, our whole mission is like you don't have to shed that identity. Now, look, is executing sales calls is the adrenaline rush of running out on the field in front of 80,000 people? No, like of course not. But there's still fulfillment and
Yeah.
enjoyment in the business world and life after sports. And I think there you can be proud of building something, building a career, and I think relying on that athlete mindset actually goes a long way to build a successful career after sports.
Yeah. So the post, where did the motivation come from? Where did the idea come from? How did it start?
Yeah, so it was really kind of that few years after sports was over and navigating the business world, and I knew going back to community part of leaving sports behind, I knew that communal social element. I heard so many athletes who were retired talk about missing the team, the locker room, more so than the competition and everything else. And so I was fully aware that like when I was stepping away from football, like that transition socially was going to be difficult, especially moving to New York where I had no community. Um, I think what made that transition harder was as I got into the business world, got into kind of the corporate world, and became more familiar. You go from this environment in sports and this ecosystem and culture where we're an environment we are a product of our environment. But when you're in sports, everyone works extremely hard. Everyone's super competitive. It's a performance oriented culture. Everyone is accountable and disciplined and gritty. And, what I was talking about, all these intangibles that athletes have. And it created this environment that I thrived in. I was a benefactor of being in this environment when it came to my own growth as an athlete, but also outside of sports. And then you step in the corporate culture and it's very, very different. And it can be stale at times. And you start getting around people that aren't as competitive, that don't work as hard, that don't like feedback, and it's kind of a space that I struggled in. And I think, you kind of always realize, okay, that's an athlete or that's an athlete. Like I connect more with them.
Yeah.
But I had this growing void of no longer being in community with people that I've been in community with a really long time that are my best friends and the people I get along with best. And so it was through kind of that missing, that longing, that I had this idea for this. And I tried to join that void by joining or fill that void by joining some different organizations in New York, and nothing ever was specifically for athletes. So of course nothing ever filled that void for me. And Soho House, which I don't know if people are familiar with what Soho House is, but Soho House is a private membership club that started in London for people in the creative arts industry, and they're a little more broad on kind of who their member is now. But they have a Soho House. Actually, have three Soho Houses in New York City. But that was kind of one of the things that I joined to belong to fill that void. And in 2019, I was sitting in a Soho House one day, thinking, "Hey, this place is cool. Space is beautiful, but I don't belong here. Like these aren't my people. I don't fit in here,
No
and
synergy.
no synergy. I feel so out of
Yeah.
place." And I thought, if everyone in here was an athlete, like that would feel like home for me.
Yeah.
And that was kind of when the idea was initially planted, and then COVID happened, and we all had a lot more time to sit around and think about different things, and really thought more about this idea. I had a thought partner who runs an early stage venture fund called Max Ventures out of New York City. His name's Ryan Darnell, and I was kind of pitching this idea to Ryan or telling him about what I was thinking. And coincidentally, he was a college baseball player. He played baseball at Middle Tennessee State. And he was like, "Man, this idea sounds awesome. I'd love to be a part of this, but also would love to kind of be a thought partner as you think about what this could become and how do you get off the ground." And he did that, and we kind of went through like a 5-month validation period of like talking to athletes, talking to investors, talking to people who ran networks and social clubs, and just got so much validation that we should go build this. And the idea has evolved from Soul House for athletes to now much more of community and network. And if all we did was hang out in a club, that would be a disservice, because again, we know athletes have all this potential to be this tremendous business leaders. And so how do we actionize this and make this more performance oriented? And that's where we studied things like YPO and EO and some of these networks that have been around for a really long time. And yeah, but that was kind of the birth to the Post, and we launched it 2 years ago now in April of 2023, and we're off and running.
So what's the long-term projection of that? It's only 2 years old. I think you have what, like
Yeah,
550 members now?
we're at
Something like that?
700 members, 700 members
700.
now.
Wow.
Yeah. And yeah, look, we want to keep growing. Again, at the highest level, it's how do we build this support system, this team for the group of people that we think have an advantage to be tremendous leaders. And I think
Yeah.
especially now as we look at the world today and the culture today, like we need better leaders. We need more equipped leaders. And athletes have the advantage to go be tremendous leaders. And again, there's data that backs this up. 52% of women in the C-suite today were college athletes. 15 of the last 21, I guess now 22 presidents were college athletes. There's an outsized number of Fortune 500 CEOs that were college athletes, and college athletes make up roughly 1.5% of the U.S. population. So that's a tremendous outperformance
Right.
of athletes when it comes to the business world. So it is because of their background as athletes, not overcoming and being in spite of what they've develop through sports. And so I think we just want to be the support system. How do we continue to support those leaders and equip them um and then just inspire at, like, I think so many athletes, as we've kind of alluded to, create these artificial, these glass ceilings for ourselves, these artificial ceilings for ourselves, because we deal with this certain level of insecurity that there was this social lens that, or societal lens, that we looked at athletes as dumb jocks, and that was a liability. And that, again, that couldn't be further from the truth. It's an asset, an advantage that we should continue to take confidence and invest in. And so we just want to keep growing. We're not for every athlete. We kind of have a standard of it's being an athlete in the business world. So, people apply and we score athletic resume, we score business resumes, a cumulative score that has to be met for us to keep moving people in the process. But we're just, we want to keep building this tremendous team that's there to support each other and hold each other accountable, and recreate that ecosystem that we once had, that was a catalyst for growth as athletes in sports, and do it as athletes in the business world.
So there's people listening, Christian, about, hey, that sounds pretty cool. Like what goes on in there? What kind of things can I expect? What kind of things can I get from being a member, other than just
Yeah.
hanging out with a bunch of athletes?
Yeah. So, we YPO is, for people who aren't familiar with YPO stands for Young Presidents Organization. It's been around for almost 80 years. It's kind of been the pinnacle business networking community out there for a long time. 47,000 global members. You have to be a president, CEO, asset, or managing director with so much assets under management or revenue per year, so many employees to qualify, and it's like $10,000 to $25,000 depending what chapter you're in. But as we were studying, preparing for this idea for the post, we just kept talking to people that were like part of their YPO forum for decades and had built these really strong relationships and found so much value. And really what we realized is, like, what a forum is a team. They were on these curated peer advisory groups that had people who were, different roles and different companies and different industries and different experiences and expertise. And when they came together, it was like the sum greater than their parts, and we got so much value through the accountability and leaning on these groups. It's like, okay, that's a team. So part of what we do is we do teams, and a team's 8 to 12 individuals that meets on a monthly basis, that we put together off similar career stage and life stage. And they're just to have a personal board of advisors, have conversations, bounce ideas off of, have some accountability. So that's a part of what we do. We also have kind of these industry or interest-based groups that we call collectives. So we have about 100 entrepreneurs that are part of the post, and they get together once a month. We have a collective, or a creatives group, an investors group, a parenting group, a business, a sports group, and we keep adding more and more of those. But, like, how do we silo people? Because we are, when it's based on an identity and operating system, it has, everyone's doing different things across different industries, and so we try to create ways of, like, siloing people in a micro community that they can have conversations that are specifically valuable to them. And I think every athlete's still defined by that growth mindset. I think we're all humble enough to say there's always opportunities to get better, and still competitive and wanting to make those improvements. And so we want to be the catalyst of that growth by, having workshops and speaker series and presenting, getting into the weight room, from a leadership perspective, and investing in those opportunities to continue to get better and grow. And so we present those opportunities, and then we do a lot of events, whether that's in New York, with a space in New York that we call our clubhouse. I'm sitting in our podcast room right now. But it's a co-working social club space that every member has access to this space. Our ambition is, can we go build more of these across the country? But we're really investing in kind of these local chapter growth, local chapter growth by running, a lot of social events. We have events in LA and Phoenix and San Francisco and Austin and Denver and Chicago, Atlanta, DC, Boston. We're going to Nashville and Dallas soon. We have members all over the country. And so how do we, really invest in getting those members together and growing the, chapter in Chicago from 35 to 400 members. And but I think it's, it's community, it's that iron sharpening iron mentality, getting around a bunch of high performers that are there to push us, that we can lean into and feed off of. And we do an annual conference that we call Summit that we'll do in October, and bring as many of our members together in person. And then, there's a long list of things that we want to get to. I still need a competitive itch. And so how do we, can we create adult sports leagues? And we have a team that, we have a sand volleyball team that plays in a league in New York, and we'll have a softball team, but can we have these all over the country? And, we have thoughts. We've had people say, hey, we want to hire more athletes. So we talked about, can we develop a talent program and help athletes, be placed in jobs? And, we fully believe in the intersection, the crossover between being an athlete and entrepreneur. So we have ideas for an internal incubator. How do we help athletes, found their own companies, get them off the ground, provide advisory services, and so a ton of stuff that we want to continue to add to the experience.
So talk about your facility. I haven't been in there yet,
I
but
know you're in Jersey, Jeff. What are you
I
doing?
know I'm coming in. I got to get in there. Um, I've seen the pictures, man. It looks pretty sweet. What is it all about? What's it like? You just mentioned you're in the podcast room. What can the
Yeah.
members do in that facility?
Yeah, so really it's kind of like everyone's second apartment. So it is we have a bar with TVs everywhere, with couches, we have conference rooms, we have a podcast room, we have some like Normatec boots, a little like at-home fitness gym area. Um, it's for people to use for whatever they want. So people work here during the day if they don't have if they work from home. People can host meetings here. We do a lot of events. The NFL actually just rented our space and last week in the middle of March they hosted what they called NFL Business Week, and they brought in like 40 active NFL guys and put them through kind of business 101. And so we host a lot of events like that. We did some March Madness events and Super Bowl party. And so it's really just, hey, hang out with other members, get work done here. We do a lot of events, and it's a good spot. Again, we hope to go build more of these around the country where it makes sense to do so. And but again, if you end up in New York City, any member has access to it. But it's a fun spot. We were in a WeWork building for 2 years,
Yeah.
so it was so nice to get a WeWork into our own space.
Now, where's it located? So everybody can know.
We're at 23rd Street between Fifth and Sixth Avenue in the Flatiron district of Manhattan.
Okay. And Ashlyn, that's her name, right? Ashlyn?
Yeah, yeah.
She does a heck of a job. I'm sure you hear
She
that all the time.
Yeah, she's great. What is awesome about our whole team is, all athletes. So Ashton played golf. Her story's amazing. She was the number one amateur in the world at one point in golf, and went to Clemson and was on the inaugural women's golf team there. Only played there 1 year, turned pro. Was on the professional circuit for a bit, had some nerve damage in a shoulder that kind of had to force her to stop playing, and went and ran some private memberships in the golf space. And she was one of our earliest hires, and has been tremendous in designing this experience. And Wes is kind of our VP of product, but really just does a bunch of things behind the scenes that keeps the community up and running. And he played football at Yale. And Ronald, who does a lot in our clubhouse, was a lacrosse player in college. And Catherine, who's our COO, was a squash player at Harvard, and then was in the Navy, and she's tremendous.
Wow.
So just a really great group. And definitely one of the selfish reasons of starting this community was so I could be a part of it and benefit from it. So our team does such a great job of owning what we're doing, so that I also can be a member and fully participate in the things that we have going on, and not just be on the side of building it.
Yep. So what's next for you and the Post?
Yeah, good question. We want to keep growing. I mean, I think there's so many athletes in the business world that we want to keep supporting, and I think there's a network effect as this group gets bigger that creates more and more value. And so we want to keep growing. Again, that's growing with the standard, so we can keep the community really valuable. And so everyone does need to apply. We filter those applications and vet them. We interview everybody that we talk to, or that we flag as good candidates, before we send an invitation out for them to join. We keep doing more and more events, provide more and more programming. How do we continue to find new insights and skill sets that we can present to just be better performers in business and leadership. And so yeah, I mean, look, it's a community that's built on growth and providing the best experience that we can, and for our members.
It's awesome. I mean, it's a phenomenal opportunity. I mean, for what I've seen and been part of so far, which I'm just scratching the surface, and I can't wait to get deeper into it. And get into the city and hang out with you guys and have a good time,
Yeah,
which will be
yeah.
fun. Um, but Christian, we talked about a lot of stuff, from high school to college to the pro to the Post. Is there anything we haven't hit on that you think we should touch on before we wrap it up?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that was pretty all encompassing. We hit on a lot of different areas. but I think it goes back. I think like if anyone can take away the one thing, I think it's that idea of controlling what you can control. And I think the thing that you can control is your work ethic and your attitude and your willingness to be coachable and finding those ways to figure out how I can identify those things that I can be better. And I think athletes, we all always have that mindset that we are kind of in control of our own destiny. And I think even as athletes transition to the business world, I think we should all maintain that same mentality and that same level of confidence. But obviously preparation breeds confidence, work ethic breeds confidence. So you got to put the work in to do it. But I think athletes are uniquely at an advantage to do exactly that.
Yeah. You definitely got that right. Control the controllables. And I think right now, Christian, what you're doing with the post is you're actually controlling what the next step can be for many athletes, and I think some athletes come out of college, come out of the pros, whatever they're playing, they don't know what the next step is. They don't know what to
Yeah,
control. And I think by creating that synergy, that likability, that commonality inside the post, it's you become the product of the people you hang around.
for sure.
You know,
Yeah. And I think what we've really built is this idea of the veteran locker room, right? When I was a freshman at Florida State or I was a rookie in the NFL, I stepped in the locker room, in the NFL with guys who are on the eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th year in the league, or as a freshman in college, juniors and seniors who know what it takes to compete at that level. And you watch them, you build relationships with them, you start figuring out, okay, how do I need to operate to be a high performer at this level? And I think what we now have at the Post is this community of the veteran locker room where people have successfully transitioned to the business world that know what it takes to do that, to compete at a high level in the business world. And now, who athletes who are a bit younger in their business careers or just transitioning out, we have this place to learn from, to build those
yeah,
relationships, to watch people and people that understand what you have, that the value that you have as an athlete and what you bring to the table. And that's why we've had a lot of our executive members say, hey, we want to hire athletes. How do you help us
yeah.
with that? And but yeah, look, I'm grateful to have the opportunity to create this community, but I'm just grateful to be a part of this community. And I always say this: if someone else had built this, I would have been a member 7 years ago and just
Yeah.
saw the white space to go do it. And it's been a lot of fun, but a lot more to be done for sure.
That's awesome. Listen, well, I'm grateful to have you on the show to talk about it,
Thanks,
and
Jeff.
I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day. And I'm sure I don't know if there's a bunch of people there right now, but you probably want to get back to hanging out with the other athletes. But thanks for being on the show, Christian, and I look forward to seeing you in the city at the Post.
Yeah, Jeff, looking forward to having you meet you in person for sure.